Voting is an opportunity for voices to be heard. It's one of our most important freedoms. Voting isn't just a right, it's a privilege, and the power to speak up and choose people that represent your values and beliefs. KCAT TV is proud to present Coffee and Candidates, one-on-one interviews to introduce candidates running for council in Los Gatos and Monte Sereno. Let's welcome our host, Dr. Larry Gerston.
Hi, I'm Larry Gerston. Let's have coffee with the candidates. Come on in. Welcome to Coffee and Candidates, brought to you by the Los Gatos Community Foundation, the Tour Factory, and the Los Gatos Coffee Roasting Company. Also, let's not forget, we're here in the KCAT studios, and of course we couldn't have done it without our sponsors or KCAT, so we thank them all. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Rowena Turner of the Monte Sereno City Council, who will be meeting with us for the next few minutes as we have coffee and the candidate. Hi, Rowena.
Hello.
We're coming to you via Zoom in case our viewers want to know. I understand you're away right now in Oregon, in another home, and I hope everything is safe for you.
I hope so too.
So we're wishing the best for you and the area over the next few days and weeks. So you have our best wishes. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, first of all, I want to say, Larry, I am so glad to be here, believe it or not. And I want to thank you for the opportunity. I am running for re-election to our city council. And let me tell you a little bit about myself. I emigrated from the Philippines with my family. My father was a colonel in the Philippine Army. And in World War II, he was a junior officer in the famous Los Baños raid, which freed over 2,000 American prisoners of war that were held at internment camps. My mother was a special education teacher in Sutter County for 35 years. She actually got my name from the novel Ivanhoe, Rowena. I met my husband at Hewlett-Packard. We moved to Monte Sereno in the late 80s, where our son was born. Today, our son is a co-founder and CTO of a software startup, and I hope he continues to do well. I left Intel Corporation after working there for 11 years. I wanted to be a teacher like my mother, so I went to get my master's in education, a California teaching credentials, and I started teaching math and computer science to incarcerated youth at a county prison school in Los Baños. And I'm not really sure if it's actually there anymore because it could have burnt down. I found that very rewarding and satisfying. I don't know the best way to say this, Larry, but I love this country. You know, I want to continue to make meaningful contributions, especially to our city. I have been on the council for 4 years now, and there are several things that I have come to believe that are really important for our city. Probably the most important thing is the new housing element coming up soon in 2023. Sacramento is actually mandating that jurisdictions promote housing at various income levels: moderate, below moderate, low, and very low. In the past, Monte Sereno has met and exceeded our numbers through the development of affordable dwelling units called ADUs. Now, this round, however, we're expecting the numbers to be more than twice. So it's going to be 235% over what we had in 2015, which was required the last time. And what I have seen coming down from the legislature are even more housing bills that would restrict a city's ability to manage its own land use policies. So let me give you an example. There are bills that mandate that fourplexes, for example, should replace single-family homes without regard to setbacks, height requirements, environmental requirements, or even adequate parking. Unfortunately, Larry, this is a new reality and it's very challenging. Challenging for city council like Monte Sereno and probably even Los Gatos.
Maybe we should start there and try to mine through some of these issues. I think the housing question is an excellent place to start. We know the dilemma.
Yes.
We know that the state is unlikely to change these requirements because we have a dearth of housing. The state is short about 2 million homes, I believe. And so regardless of what we might think about the legislation, it is a reality. And so my question to you is, knowing you have this huge deadline, looming, knowing you've got space issues, what are your hopes for doing something to remedy this, besides attempting to change the legislation? Assuming you have to meet the legislation, how do you plan, how do you propose that the city of Monte Sereno deal with it?
Okay, so there are many other cities and citizens group that have formed together that vehemently oppose these bills from Sacramento. I think we should actively join them and present a united front. So that's one way we can do it. We've also noticed, because I'm on the California Cities Committee, that some of these bills will allow for exceptions to their requirements. For example, my understanding is that the Housing Accountability Act permits a city to deny a project if that project violates objective standards in the city's general plan. It is also it also has an exemption for violations under CEQA, for example. So making our general plan less general and more specific may offer some protection from this legislation. I have suggested to our council that we hire a knowledgeable consultant to go through our general plan and recommend ways to strengthen it. Another way we can do this is to actually lobby our assemblymen and 2 candidates for the Senate that Monte Sereno is a built-out city with very usable land and a unique character that most of us want to preserve. So I think those are some of the things that we want. I know that our citizens want to retain the rural, relaxed nature of our community, and we need to push back on some of these mandates. So I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do have some ideas.
Okay. Talking about housing, as long as we're on that subject, you may or may not have seen this morning's Mercury News, but literally on page 1 is an issue talking about Monte Sereno housing, and it has to do with a family that wanted to build a home on a vacant lot, and apparently it's been approved a couple of times but then turned down. I'm sure you know what lot I'm talking about in the family. I think the last name is Reddy. Does that help you?
Yes.
Yes. Can you tell us what's going on? Because this is not particularly friendly news for the town of Monte Sereno, city of Monte Sereno in the paper.
Yes. Unfortunately, I cannot talk about it because we are negotiating with the developer. She's a developer from another city, so I don't think it would be prudent of me to be able to make comments on her case. So if you would excuse me, because there could be potential litigation, so I am not able to make comments.
Okay, I assume the negotiations are designed to find some middle ground so that the city and her will avoid a lawsuit, which is what she's threatening to do. I assume that's the purpose of negotiation.
I think one of the things that let me cite an example since we're on this. In 2015, I'm sure you heard about Hacienda, the Hala Hacienda.
Of course.
Okay. In 2015, we were also required to produce multiple family units, 15 of them. At that time, a previous council had proposed to solve this problem by rezoning the Baptist church.
Yes.
So what we wanted at that time, the council wanted at that time, was to take an acre out of the church's parking lot and daycare playground to build an apartment complex. So the church vehemently opposed this, and over 400 local residents sued the city to stop it, and the city lost. So we went to court over that, and we lost. So we ultimately we solved this problem by working with the owner of Hacienda property, which is now called Montalva Oaks, uh, and Summerhill Homes is actually building the property. We agreed on a 36 unit development, of which 15 were duplexes and triplexes. The developer also agreed to maintain several of these units as below market rate rentals to meet our requirements for low income housing. So we were able to do that. And I call this the great compromise at that time, because when you look at it, you have the developer getting his property, right, developed, and from the city's perspective, we got our arena numbers.
So given,
I think this is going to be a serious challenge for cities like Monte Sereno, because the state is coming down with a one size fit all rule that is very difficult for small cities like Los Gatos, Monte Sereno, Cupertino, Saratoga, right? And this is going to be a very, very difficult challenge for us in 2023.
what do you think of an idea where a city like Monte Sereno, maybe even Los Gatos, challenged because of space, buys the land, so to speak, not literally, from a city with a lot of land, like Los Gatos, like San Jose, and says, okay, you're scheduled, San Jose, to put in 100 houses. We want you to put in 150, and we will pay what is needed to do that. Like carbon offsets, okay, the same idea.
Yeah.
What do you think? Would the state allow that, do you think? And would you be willing to do that?
Well, the San Mateo County actually started doing that. However, when they pursued this thing, not many cities in San Mateo County wanted to actually do trading. You know, we will give you some money and we'll build in your city. And that didn't happen. So as part of the cities association, we talked about it, and most of the cities there, I can't even think of anybody that said, yes, we would be willing to do that. So none of the cities want to do that because they all have their arena numbers that they have to contend with. And in fact, Monte Sereno is probably one of the few cities that have met the arena numbers for 2015. We had, I believe it was 61, and we have 77.
So given that the church court case was handed down in such a manner that you could have been allowed to build there, would you go back and consider that as part of the solution next time?
Will you say that again, Larry, please?
Given the Baptist church, where you were going to take an acre from the church, and the courts upheld that, would you consider perhaps doing that next time as part of the solution to this problem?
I am not sure. I don't know. Probably not.
Okay.
Because it would be very difficult for us to go to any private owner and say, oh, by the way, we want to come up here and we're going to rezone your property.
Yes, I understand.
Right?
And you'd have a lot of neighborhood opposition.
And you will get a lot of neighborhood opposition.
Right. Okay.
So I'm not really sure I would even consider that.
All right. We have more to talk about.
I think, Larry, let me say this. I think in the end, what we need to do, both sides, the developer as well as the city officials, we will need to be willing to compromise. Okay. And perhaps from the city's perspective, there are sometimes you may be willing to litigate. We all know that lawsuits and threat of lawsuits can be used to intimidate. And these housing bills are likely to spur hundreds, maybe thousands of lawsuits across the state. So
Okay.
I think we need strong legal representation with expertise in land use issues who can follow the legislation and the court challenges and advise us on when we should push back legally.
Okay. We have.
I'll admit that I'm the first one to complain about litigation expense. However, there may be some things that are worth fighting for.
We have a lot more to talk about, but we're going to take a pause right now because Sharon Childs of the Los Gatos Community Foundation has a few words for us and the viewers. So let's hear from Sharon, and then we'll go ahead and continue once we come back. Sharon?
Thanks, Larry. Hi, I'm Sharon Childs, Los Gatos Community Foundation President. I'm here in Oak Meadow Park by a historic bandstand gazebo where our history started in 1991. We fund local nonprofits for projects that they do to enhance our community. We also give out community service scholarships to our seniors at our 3 local high schools. The Los Gatos Community Foundation is proud to be sponsoring this Coffee and Candidates series.
Thank you, Sharon. Appreciate it. So we're going to talk some more a little bit with Rowena Turner. She is a candidate for re-election to the Monte Sereno City Council. So we've talked a lot about housing. Let's talk a little bit about the bureaucracy at Monte Sereno. There seems to have been a good deal of anxiety, I guess, among the staff over the last few years. Complaints that they've been treated poorly. A lot of staff have left. I know this is a sensitive issue, but what can you tell us about that?
Well, let me actually talk about some of the infrastructure enhancements that we have made in Monte Sereno.
Well,
anytime a change happens.
Wait a minute, Rowena. Before we do that, I'd appreciate you answering the question so that we can tie that one up, and then we can talk about infrastructure.
Okay. One of the things that happened in Monte Sereno this last year is we had our city finance manager actually retired. And so close to about a year ago, we hired a new finance manager, Reynold Samaranos, who had many years of experience as a senior financial manager. One of the things that we realized that we needed was to change and update our financial processes. He implemented our best known accounting methods for the city. He also reduced our costs based on streaming our operations. We also realized then that Reynold actually volunteered, and he said, we need to change our manual payroll system. We were devoting a lot of time into a manual payroll system. It would take our city clerk 3 days to cut checks. And so based on that, we moved to ADP. He is also in the process of implementing an online accounts payable system, which means that we can be more efficient and we can also issue fewer checks. So I think in such a short period of time, Reynold has done an amazing job. What we need to do is to realize that for a city like Monte Sereno, we have had processes that have been in place for so long, and we don't keep up with technology. So I think that's one of the things we need to do. Let me look at the building inspector. We had a building inspector that left, Rob Chiorello. We have now a new building inspector. He was there previously as a contractor, but now what he's also doing is he's automating a lot of our building permits and tracking of our building processes. The problem is we also did building permits using paper and pencil. And when you do that, it's not very efficient. And many times when citizens would come in, because it was all paper and pencil, it was difficult to really keep track and have accountability to that process. So I think as we implement and we bring up our standards to 20th century, I think we will have a better process. So I think all in all, automating many of our manual processes, we will be able to provide better service to our residents.
Okay, that answers some of it, but from what I understand, the staff there either did unionize or wanted to unionize because they were unhappy with the way they were treated. What's that all about?
I think one of the benefits of having that union actually was both for the employee and for the city. We had many benefits that were so outdated that even other cities didn't have it. So there were some benefits that, and let me say this, we left the benefits intact for our current employees. All right. So in fact, they were left whole. What we did is for new employees, we took out some of the benefits to be in line with the rising cost of administration. You know that largely for many cities, the biggest expense is administrative cost, right? And so that's what we did. So if you ask the employees today, they're pretty much in line and with what they had before. So nothing was changed.
Okay.
We had people leave for a variety of reasons, right? Some were personal, right? It's also unfortunate that some left, and we were sad to see them leave. But we have been able to bring new people in that would be able to implement operational improvements. So I don't believe that, you know, any place you go to, any company you go to, there's always turnover. And that's a reality of life.
Okay, before we go, I'd like to ask you this last question. If you are reelected, what's the number one priority for you to see through?
Okay, I think that there are four things I'd like to do. Number one is the housing element. We need, each city is unique. A one-size-fits-all approach, as is coming from Sacramento, is very damaging to small cities. Monte Sereno is a very built-out community, and we have very little land available. Most of our residents feels very strongly about preserving our unique character. That is why it's important to preserve local control over land use decisions. These are very difficult decisions, right? Involving trading off competing interests. There's no simple answer. Each project has to be evaluated on its own merit. So, as I said earlier, the council must get creative about ways to facilitate housing and be willing to push back at the same time. Now, to answer your question about employees leaving, that we're looking at fiscal responsibility. We need to be fiscally responsible managing our finances through a rigorous budget process. Another goal of mine involves the importance of providing oversight and accountability as good stewards of city's finances. You know, we're living in a time of COVID, right? Layoffs. The unemployment rate in California is at 15%. We don't know what the consequences of the pandemics are, or even the fires. So we need to reduce discretionary spending as much as possible to remain flexible and better be able to respond to our changing conditions. I think it's also important to drive sound fiscal policy, to control spending, to address city unfunded pension liability. Look at all the cities who have very, very huge multi-million-dollar unfunded pension liability. And we need to control the rising cost of city administration. the council is not here to authorize spend, right? But to provide oversight and accountability.
Now,
I think those are the two things. And let me just quickly say here that one other thing that I want to look at is emergency preparedness. This is something that's very personal to me. This is something that I am very passionate about. Emergency preparedness is I am a key promoter for the program. I have been for the last 3 years. I am also a CERT trained volunteer, and I give talks at events at the Kiwanis Club, and I will continue to do this.
Okay,
The
well,
CERT
there's a
program,
lot.
I don't know if you're familiar with it, is with the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department as well as the fire department.
Well,
One of
thank
the
you.
things we need to do, with the program, there are several what you call ICPs, right? Incident Command Posts. And Los Gatos, you have plenty of incident command posts. Monte Sereno, we only have one, and that's in the Daves Avenue School. Ideally, we should have several for our neighborhoods. And the problem is, Chief DeSena has told me, is that we don't have enough CERT volunteers in Monte Sereno to man these ICPs.
Rowena,
So we need to be
you've
able
given
to
us
recruit CERT volunteers to man ICPs.
you've given us a lot to think about, Rowena, and I'm sure the viewers appreciate you taking the time to talk with them. We're grateful. Thank you. We wish you well, and we hope that the fires leave you alone and are put out quickly. And for everybody else out there, we hope you benefited from this as well. We look forward to seeing you another time to have coffee and candidates.